Are we ready to go?
We're up on YouTube, but I don't know if you wanted to wait for Charlie to get in. But otherwise, we're ready to go.
All right, let's give him another minute or so.
I think we should let Charlie go to the day he thought the meeting was and have a good time. That's mean, I'm teasing.
Well, I think we should go ahead and kick it off.
Okay, all right, sure.
Well, welcome everybody to this August 31st, 2020 special meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. This is a special meeting designed to update the commission and the public on the progress of the Charleston City Plan. We've got some updates from some of our consultant team, as well as we're going to review with the commission the existing comp plan and the elements of that. And then we'll also have a brief period for public comment. And with that, unless there are comments or questions from the commission, I'm going to turn it over to our water land use team.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. David Wagner with Wagner and Ball.
If Chloe could please let us share the screen. We've got some slides to share. Thank you.
And that's Andy trying to get the, with Wagner and Ball, trying to get the screen so that we can share some of the work. Also on the call today is Dale Morris with the Water Institute of the Gulf, our partner on this project. I don't know if Aaron Stevens or Taylor Schenker from Circulus are on, but there are local landscape, and when I say local, I mean most important, really, consultant. And then Josh Robinson with Robinson Design Engineers is maybe also on the call, but certainly on the team. And you know, it's good to look 10 years forward. It's, I think, useful to look 10 years back. I thought that the city plan document that put in context the growth that Charleston's had over the last 10 years is helpful, because it's been a period of growth, but the growth is all around you even more so, and the city itself is driving the regional growth. So I think as we look 10 years ahead and think further along, and especially with respect to how much land you have and how much water you have and how you use those. So Andy, please.
Thank you all to the Planning Commission for the opportunity to present and update you today. I've got a whole bunch of slides and images just to quickly go through some of our analytical method and some of our preliminary results. So please keep in mind these maps bear much more scrutiny and study, but I'm going to go pretty quick just to give you a sense of where we've been and where we're headed. Just a note about the schedule, where we are in the process. We've just about finished the city's phase 2, is establishing a shared vision. The schedule maybe has shifted back slightly, so we're still really in some of the analysis phase, getting ready to work towards supplying recommendations phase and the water lab the city will be hosting on September 23rd. The next opportunity for us really to engage with the wider public. Just a brief incomplete summary of the stakeholder engagement we've conducted to date. There are more names. I know that I've missed some here, but just to make note that we've been comprehensive across the region, across the zone of study within the city. By region, I mean within the city. From James and Johns to West Ashley, Peninsula, Daniel, Cainhoy, across citizen leaders and elected officials, city staff. Okay, so now the data blitz. These are just initial data metrics trying to define the water thresholds to help guide planning decisions moving forward. So obviously precipitation is a driver. We've measured and mapped a 100-year floodplain, the FEMA existing DFIRM floodplain. But we've seen elsewhere across the country that the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain and rainfall rates become the 100-year rates as these floodplains are remapped over time. The rain is becoming more intense. We've discussed with Matt Fountain, the city is already incorporating a 10% increase in their planning metrics above the 100-year threshold. It may need to be revisited at some point in the future. But you get a sense of magnitude here of amount of water and levels. Another critical threshold is sea level rise, of course. These are the NOAA metrics, but as David mentioned, we're looking 10 years out for the purpose of this plan with an awareness of 30 and even 50, understanding that the data becomes less certain at that level, but the trend is clear. Another critical threshold, of course, hurricanes and storm surge. So mapping storms over time, return periods, paths, and ultimately levels, threshold levels that might guide factors of safety for development. And then converting all of those metrics into meaningful levels for people, including, you'll see at the bottom, the note to add building types, note to self, just to additionally translate these levels per building foundation type, land use type, building type, et cetera. So now some of our mapping and analysis across the city. I'm going to stay at the city level, this kind of scale of map, and I'll zoom in a bit at the end just to give you a sense of how this analysis plays out in a little finer grain in Inner West Ashley. So we took an approach to find kind of a new city boundary based on watersheds. So this is a slightly updated, maybe unconventional city boundary, especially around outer West Ashley and some of the outer Cainhoy area, that captures all of the water flowing into city property. These distinctions also roughly correspond for the purpose of analysis to the vulnerability analysis. And we've taken a great deal of data and a great deal of foundational work from that report. It's excellent work. Then at the next scale down, we mapped all of the watersheds across the city. So you get to see through this map sort of a scale of recommendation, maybe ultimately, that it's important to zoom in to each of these watersheds within the study area to understand the impact of water and land use types within them. A lot of consequences upstream, downstream, and at a very localized scale. So we'll be working towards that scale, breaking down. Of course, mapping surface elevation, I think this is something people are largely familiar with, but you see some of the bigger geological features across the region, these sand ridges through Johns Island, even carrying across through Cainhoy, that high ground yet to be developed, some other critical influences, land and ecological influences in that area, cultural, historic as well. Then also an overlay for political jurisdictions. So green indicating here watersheds subject to one city and county jurisdiction. And as you work up to red and orange and red, you see the watersheds subject to multiple other jurisdictions where extra coordination may be needed for development recommendations, solutions, flooding solutions going forward. We've also taken a look at the potential for marsh migration across the landscape. This is obviously a very dynamic environmental condition. It's part of the beauty and value of the place to begin with, its dynamism. And over time, as sea level is projected to continue to rise for the purpose of stormwater storage, storm surge buffering, and other environmental factors, mapping where marsh will tend to go naturally may have a benefit, may require some protection, some level of protection. So as you map 3 feet of sea level rise, you can start to see where those areas of inundation progress up creeks and inland. We've also done a little bit of mapping preliminary mapping to identify the existing land cover types in those areas of projected marsh migration. So we can see who and what will be impacted and what steps may be able to be taken to accommodate this natural process over time. We've also done a land cover, land use analysis. This is a national data set, so there's some coarseness to this, but you can see red essentially is developed area, different degrees within each of the watersheds. Within that data, we've been able to map the residential foundation types. So that's what's shown here. This is critical to think about how those water thresholds influence existing development and future retrofits to this development. Whether a building is raised on piers in green, so you can see on the barrier island and some of the edge of the sea island conditions, pier foundations versus red, which is slab on grade. So at various elevations, some meeting the BFE targets and some not. There's a final resolution to this for future conversation. So just a few more slides here, thinking about now, this maybe takes an extra second of explanation, but mapping across the bottom, the percentage of land in the city versus its elevation. So you can see essentially 50% of the land across the study area is at about 13.5 feet in elevation, half above, half below, all the way down to mean low water. This thinking about land and percentages is important when you factor in types of water levels, those thresholds again. And we've been able to identify not only the floodplain, the tidal risk, but in the zone above the tide, this compound flood risk. That's the area where water from rainfall flowing down towards the sea meets tide coming up. So there's an extra level of interaction there in terms of flood risk. I'll briefly describe this curve. This blue hatched area is a mapping of all this land within the FEMA 100-year floodplain. And this is a high-level abstraction, but what you see is that about 15% of the land in the floodplain, 100-year floodplain, is above 12 feet, which is a little bit counterintuitive that there's land so high up, which remains in the floodplain. What that indicates is land subject to flooding by rainfall. So some of those higher ground areas up watersheds and up creeks continue to flood, but from rain. And as you move down in the landscape, the influence of tidal flooding becomes more apparent. And then there's that compound risk where they interact in between. So it's kind of this long sloped area. There's a similar analysis for percentage of land impacted by a Category 3 storm surge. And basically, there's kind of an inflection point at 15 feet here. So 15 land up to 15 feet. Basically, 90% of the land 15 feet or below would flood in a Category 3 storm surge. And so this is an infrequent event, but another critical threshold. And then mapping those back on the land surface. When you map that land surface and compound flood risk zone over the city, you get something like this. I'll just point out one area to give you an example of how this works. If you look in Inner West Ashley here, you see this darker blue hatched area. I know this is very zoomed in and hard to see, but darker blue hatch is the FEMA floodplain. The light blue field here is that compound flood risk zone. So what we've been able to identify across the city is areas of potentially compound flood risk where rain and tides interact that are outside of the current FEMA 100-year floodplain. And we've tried to do some ground truthing with city staff and others to verify that. So finally wrapping up, an example at the kind of borough scale, I'm calling it, we likely need to revisit this term, but Inner West Ashley. So here's that graph flipped backwards now, but the thing to look at is this compound flood risk zone where tides and rain interact. Mapping that across to percentage of land cover per type. So you kind of see that most of the development in West Ashley, in Inner West Ashley, is kind of the midpoint is occurring around the 12 foot mark. This becomes important when you factor in sea level over time, and you can begin to measure percentage of development and type of development set to be impacted, which might need to be retrofitted or redeveloped in some way or protected in some way. This is an analysis that we've done across what I'm calling these boroughs, and again, merits further study in more detail in each of those areas. One more analysis here, going back to foundation type. So you can see basically red, orange, and yellow here are slab-on grades. And you can start to map those water threshold impacts against existing slab elevations and start to understand impact there. Finally, last two slides here. This is a Church Creek watershed, zooming into that watershed scale and thinking about what are the impacts upstream and downstream within the watershed. In addition, what are the impacts close to creek beds and far away from creek beds? So that's what you see here, upstream, downstream, and a break more or less that happens at Bees Ferry Road, upstream up towards up Church Creek, and then downstream to the Ashley. And then high ground and low ground within those zones. So that's the hatch area here. So there's sort of an offset, captures the floodplain around the creek itself, but then the upland areas around the edge of the watershed flowing down towards the creek have sort of a dual impact. So it's kind of upstream, downstream, high and low at the same time. This is an analysis in progress, and we're trying to translate how this scale would function as a recommendation, a zoning recommendation. Not quite sure yet, but it's important to capture these impacts for property runoff, things like tree cover at this scale on new and redevelopment. And finally, last slide, I'm just thinking about the process of permitting and how we're thinking about recommendations for front loading these land and water factors and criteria, and how we can make this type of analysis and thresholds and development criteria relevant earlier in the process. Maybe save, just guide development in a different way that's anticipating what's happening in the physical landscape at the beginning, rather than after the property uses have been allowed and determined. So that's it for us. I'd welcome any questions for myself or our team, and look forward to sharing all of this and even more detail at a finer scale as we progress.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, David, and all of your teams. Are there any questions for our team from the commission? All right. If there are no questions, thanks to Andy and David.
Ms. Jacobs has raised her hand, sir.
Oh, go ahead.
Donna, I think, Ms. Jacobs.
This is a very technical question, and maybe you can just send me some kind of reference, because I don't think we should spend time with this, but I was very curious about your storm surge calculation and how that was done, since I know we watch hurricanes all the time and they predict these storm surges and they don't quite happen the way they think. So I just wonder where's the information drawn to create the calculation to use for your formulation for the storm surge. And you can just actually send me somewhere to read that, because it's probably way too much technical stuff for this conversation right now, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Maybe just one sentence in response. I believe it's NOAA data. I'll confirm that. It's also worst case. So that analysis maps worst case across the area simultaneously. We wouldn't expect storm surge to happen worst case everywhere. That's just for the purpose of analysis.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Are there any other questions from the commission for our team?
Well, this is Charlie Karras. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I apologize for the mishap I had on getting to this meeting, but I am listening. And just as a comment, I appreciate the work, but I did win a bet with myself that Ms. Jacobs would have a question. That's all I had to say.
Well, this is a good topic to have questions on. We all know how critical this is for all of us. living here, but also trying to plan for 10, 25, 50 years out. This is so critical. So thanks to all of you. I see no other hands raised. So we'll move on to the next team. I believe this is our housing team that's presenting next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the commission for having us again. My name is Ben Maskell, and I'm the project manager for Community Data Platforms. And we are doing the housing analysis portion of the comprehensive plan. So I'm here just to give you an update on our status. We at this point have completed the bulk of the data processing stage, and what this means is that we've geocoded all the disparate sources of information that we have, both from the city and from our own consumer data files. And we've linked them to individual housing units in the city of Charleston. And all of these attributes of these various housing units will be used to build a model that predicts prices. And more on that in a little bit. But just one early success that we is our goal was really to pass back to the city as comprehensive a database as we possibly could on the housing unit stock in Charleston. And Charleston City, particularly GIS planning, they were great on getting us data really quickly, and we were able to move forward very, very quickly on that. And what we found is that there are a number of housing units in addition to the address points that we received initially. So we're very excited at this point to pass the city back a resource, a housing unit database that is wider and deeper than the one we received. So we think we'll be able to contribute substantially to Charleston's knowledge of their housing stock. So we're very excited on that front. And just to quickly mention, it's been incredibly valuable to talk to stakeholders in Charleston. Jim and Chloe and in the planning department have been really helpful in connecting us to the right people. And I just want to mention a few. Genoa Johnson, the Director of Housing Community Development, Matt Ojala, the Deputy Director, Don Cameron, the Charleston Housing Authority, and a number of others from the Chamber of Commerce to private sector realtors have really been instrumental in helping us think through the very particular and local context of Charleston to make our analysis all the more effective and useful. And just to pull out an example from those conversations, we initially started with our study area or area of interest being the urban growth boundary. And from those conversations, we heard that housing costs were really being driven by regulatory differences between neighborhoods. So we expanded our study area to be Charleston County as a whole and part of Berkeley County. So we're really excited to examine the differences in costs based on the different regulatory contexts in those different neighborhoods. So as I mentioned, we were finished primarily with a bulk of data processing, and now we're moving into the modeling and analysis stage. And what this means is we're developing machine learning algorithms to predict home valuations based on those housing unit attributes I mentioned earlier. And we are also going to predict monthly rental prices. And we will also be looking back historically at home valuations to give the city a sense of the trend in the last decade or so of housing prices based on the neighborhood and based on the attributes of those housing units. And in addition to the modeling and analysis stage, we are also doing a lot of work around feature selection. And what that means is our final product will be an online interactive tool that people can filter the housing units by. They can filter by various housing attributes. They can filter by price. They can filter by location. And we are working closely with Jim and Chloe, planning, GIS, and housing to make sure that all the features that are most relevant to people's daily jobs are there and present in this tool, because our goal is really to make this tool as useful and functional as we possibly can. In addition to the online tool that we will be developing, we're also developing standalone visualizations. So we are also working to establish a list of priorities for those visualizations. And what they'll be is a deeper dive into individual variables or subjects, such as gentrification or housing supports, those who are eligible by neighborhood. We want to show that information. And just some early success stories from our conversations around feature selection. The GIS department has passed us a tremendous amount of information about building attributes. And we've also linked this up with our own consumer data files. And to show this information and to give users the ability to filter by various housing attributes is something that will broaden the access to this information quite a bit. That information has always existed, but it's very difficult to query. So we're trying to create a tool that will remove those barriers to entry and make this information queryable and something that people can operate on a daily basis. The other success story was what we're bringing to the table are these consumer data files that have demographic information about Charleston residents. So you can filter by the housing stock, and you can see aggregate figures of the demographics of the people living in those housing units. And what's great about the consumer data files that we have access to is they're not just samples. They actually represent 95% of the adult residents in Charleston, unlike the census, which is based on samples. And our consumer data files are also updated monthly. So you're getting one of the most up-to-date and granular looks at Charleston residents. So we're really excited to provide that, which will be the impetus for the affordability analysis, which we'll be doing based on the modeled housing prices. Depending on what neighborhood you're looking at, you'll be able to see aggregate demographic information by the housing units, by the residents in those housing units, by neighborhood, et cetera, however you want to filter the information. And finally, because I'm aware that I'm probably getting close to time here, our goal really is to create a tool that if people have to do some task every single day and it takes them 10 minutes, we want to add a feature that lets them do that in a second, a single click, for instance. And we also want this tool to inform policy. We want to be able to give people information and the power to manipulate the housing stock, to understand it better, to see who's living in that at aggregate levels. So it's really what we're going for. And we're really excited to continue these discussions about what features are most important for the city, what visualizations are most important for the city. And just to end, Chloe and Jim have been amazing to this end and have been really great partners in helping us get this information. So thank you all for listening. And as Andy said, welcome to any questions. I'd love to hear them. And thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Benjamin. This is obviously, in addition to the water, affordability is a big issue for all of us. Members of the commission, are there any questions for Benjamin at this point in his analysis? Well, seeing no questions.
Ms. Jacob has her hand up again.
Donna, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for all of that. I was curious, in addition to that valuation, if I'm understanding it right, is it also the type of housing stock that could be useful in creating affordability? Because I've heard a lot in the community discussions we've had about just the need for the term using missing middle or tiny homes or this sort of thing. So is this part of this tool that you're talking about, that the type of housing and maybe zoning relating to that type of housing will create? Is that part of this discussion? Maybe I misunderstood that.
No, certainly. And a feature of the tool will allow you to filter by zoning to see what housing units fall by zoning. And we will also be displaying housing attributes that you can filter by, such as ADUs or accessory dwelling units. So you can find out how many accessory dwelling units are located in a certain geographic area. So it will allow you to search for those attributes, and it will allow you to filter by particular zones. So that should be, that's definitely something we want to do, the interactive side of things. So it can allow user-generated queries, essentially.
So is this toolkit specifically for like the planning department of the city, or will there be an element that's educational? Because I've learned that sometimes people just don't understand the meaning of density. So we get a lot of resistance during planning and rezoning for these things where people don't quite understand what that means. Will there be an educational side of this where you could direct people so they better understand, so we can facilitate the kind of change that we might need?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. The tool itself, the online tool, is really meant for the planning department and will help them inform the comprehensive plan. But I think this is a great opportunity to talk about how those standalone visualizations, their purpose could be public awareness. It could be to advance a certain awareness about an issue related to housing. And that's why that standalone viz conversation is so important, because it could be to that end, Donna, that you mentioned, public awareness about a particular issue. So I think that's a really good example of the discussions we're having with Jim and Chloe and GIS and everyone else about these viz. And it's not just about topic, it's about purpose. You know, what is the intention of this viz, and how would we define success criteria if it went out, and if we could disseminate it, and if it actually could change the conversation, that would influence how we designed it, and that would be very intentional in our development.
Because we run up against what I might call some NIMBY, where people want things, just not very close to them. And sometimes I think it's really helpful to look around our city and illustrate examples within our city that already exist. For example, I always go to my neighborhood, because my neighborhood everybody loves. I live in Burns Downs, but if you look at it, it's really a highly dense area. And there's also a lot of grandfathered in accessory dwelling units that nobody realizes. It creates affordability for rental. So I think if the public sometimes sees it in their own backyard, there are really good examples of these sorts of things that we need to make housing affordable and all the things for planning in our area. It's a good thing. So thanks for generating that tool, because I think education is going to help us a lot during this process.
Thank you for that feedback.
Great. Thank you, Benjamin. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you to both teams. This is exciting work. Really thrilled to have both teams working on these important problems, and we're looking forward to seeing more results from you as the process moves on. All right,
Thank you, sir.
Christopher, I believe I'm going to turn it over to city staff at this point.
Correct. Yes, we're going to go through a review of the Century 5 plan. Oh, and trust me, I will not take any criticisms personally, because we know there are lots of things that need to be changed in this document. That's one of the reasons we're doing a new plan. So feel free to speak freely here as we go through. But I'm going to share the screen here if I can, and I believe we are here. And let me go to slideshow. If it'll go to slideshow from beginning. Is everybody seeing a full screen slide now? Are we good on that? Okay. Okay, so this is obviously our city area in dark green, and what we're going to be doing the plan for, cover page. So I will proceed now. Of course, this is the Century 5 city plan. It was actually a 10-year rewrite of the 2000 Century 5 city plan. So we've been going with the name Century 5 in our city plans for 20 years now, but it's about to be put to rest. But anyway, that's the document we're going to be reviewing today, and we have done a staff level review of it. We have, I think, given ourselves pretty fair grades, have not been too, concerned about showing where there's some shortcomings in this document. But we're, again, interested to hear from you. You all feel free to interrupt as we're going along. I may not see everybody's hand raised or whatever as I'm looking at the slides, but other folks in the staff, if y'all would alert me to hands raised or people trying to make some comments, and we'll stop and go into those. So we're going to go back to the year 2010. As strange as it might seem, we were coming out of a recession then. Strange. And our central focus was on shifting the way we developed, and also job creation. Job creation was a very big focus of our city council. The thing to remember with all this is that our plans have a degree of politics in them, from the standpoint that city council is the entity that has to approve it. So if we're hearing things from city council and from our planning commissioners about, the way they see the world, then that is often reflected in the document. So that may be why some of the things are reflected the way they are. But at the time in 2010, to put together changes and direction of land use with transportation was a new thing for the city. We had not spent much time on that. Transportation had been a completely separate department and was an area that we just weren't really doing a lot with. But we developed a new plan that did much more with that. How successful we were, we'll see over the next few minutes. Housing supply, strangely, was not a major concern. We had in fact, oversupply to a degree from the pre-recession era, and a lot of foreclosed units were out there, and we were not hearing from the public that housing was the great concern that we do here today. And climate change and sea level rise were not a part of the discussion. Some of that was political. We had a green plan that had been put together for the city. It had been presented to city council, and city council chose not to adopt it. Instead, they just received it as information. So that gives you a good sense of, the kind of political situation we were in, because no plan is going to get anywhere if it's not adopted by council. And we knew they had just turned the green plan into just an adopted information packet. So next slide. So in the Century 5 plan, there were goals, of course, and I'm going to go through these, and hopefully this is not going to be too much my reading, but you all stop me if it's getting too monotonous here. But population and housing sought to accommodate future population growth through land use policies that encourage vibrant, safe, and diverse neighborhoods in areas that allow for efficient use of space and transportation. Seems pretty innocuous, right? And then ensure that the Charleston population has access to housing opportunities that provide diversity in building types, availability for all income levels, and proximity to transit and accessibility to job centers. Economic development, develop and implement a multi-tiered economic development strategy for attraction and retention. Cultural resources, these are all our plan elements here in bold, of course. Cultural resources, Charleston would sustain its rich and dynamic cultural heritage, all fairly innocuous here. Natural resources, protect and preserve our natural resources to the greatest extent practical. Land use, develop and maintain sufficient open space and parks so the city's diverse in uses and opportunities includes natural spaces and wildlife habitat. We wanted to implement land use and transportation planning and policies to create compact mixed use projects. You're going to see that reference a good bit in here, and that was a big focus in 2010, was encouraging these mixed use projects that for better or for worse, we're seeing a lot of now. Forming gathering places and sites designed to maximize affordable housing and encourage walking, bicycling, and the use of existing and future public transportation systems. Of course, in 2010, we had no bus rapid transit on the horizon that we are now have funded through a half-cent sales tax and voters' participation, and are seeking to get implemented. So, huge advance there. Mobility, seek to offer as many choices for mobility in Charleston as possible, from modes to routes. Municipal services, ensure the highest quality public service and facilities to city residents. Gonna move on. So what the plan and or implementation did well, this is in our staff opinion, we feel like we really did a great job with maintaining the integrity of the urban growth boundary. And that has been a planning tool we've had in place since 2000. And it has really been incredibly effective, I think, in preserving the rural character on the majority of Johns Island, where only about 15 to 20% of the island is inside the urban growth boundary. The rest is outside, and working together with Charleston County, we've upheld that. There have been a few, stumbles along the way, a couple of moves of the urban growth boundary, but essentially it went back to where it was originally. And I think it's doing a lot on Johns Island to make sure we don't have as much suburban sprawl as has been, it could have been anticipated, 20 years ago. We have seen density increase along transit-friendly corridors in the downtown, Meeting Street, Morrison Drive, King Street, on James Island, along Maybank Highway, and on Johns Island. Again, some people may not see this as a good thing, but from a planning standpoint, we are implementing what the plan calls for. Then we have the chicken and egg scenario that even though transit infrastructure is not there yet to support the density creates ridership to support the transit. And again, people, they get upset because they see us with new housing that has cars and don't realize that by putting that housing there, we can help encourage transit in the future. Significant growth has been realized in areas targeted for growth in our urban core areas and our urban areas. And we had redevelopment of vacant or underutilized sites. Some examples were Citadel Mall and the Peninsula. And again, we've been working with Citadel Mall for their redevelopment, and there's been lots more development on the Peninsula. Okay, preservation of existing neighborhoods. And again, I think that in most areas, our existing neighborhoods have maintained their strength and viability. I think there may be some suburban areas where there's concern about flooding, things like that, but those were not as high on the totem pole in the 2010 plan as they, of course, will be in the 2020 plan. Weaknesses, where the plan or implementation fell short. So our goals were probably too general. I've just been reading some of those general goals. So maybe we'll work with you all to make those a little bit more specific. The highway designation in our land use maps is very autocentric and doesn't encourage mixed use and higher density development along important transit corridors. It was used along corridors like Sam Rittenberg, Savannah, Folly Road, and I think in our new plan from a staff standpoint, we'd really like to see that one go away and something a little bit more mixed use and a little bit more transit oriented emerge. The urban growth boundary on James Island doesn't align with the Century 5 recommendations for Folly Road or the Folly Road overlay. Still is an issue. We'd like to work with our James Island residents, council members, and discuss, you know, are there some slight adjustments to the urban growth boundary along Lower Folly Road that let existing neighborhoods such as the Spyglass Apartments and the Ocean Neighbors development inside the urban growth boundary since they were built to an urban density. Preservation of existing neighborhoods at the cost of affordability. I think that because of preservation ethics and requirements such as BAR requirements, existing neighborhoods can become more expensive, and definitely our housing consultants are finding that, and I think our everyday citizens are finding that too. Recommendations for job centers, this was a land use category in the plan, were not followed to bring more employment near residential. And especially in an area like West Ashley, with our plan West Ashley, which was done 5 years ago, we have realized that we need a lot more jobs in West Ashley, and we're also hearing that on Johns Island that folks would like a lot more jobs out there. Water not mentioned. Environmental considerations were minimal. We were actually taken to task on that by the Post and Courier in their recent series on flooding. So they are correct in those from that standpoint. Did not manage the edges well, resulting in a lot of growth in the suburban edges. The lower density designation resulted in more spread rather than compact concentrations of denser development infill. This is true. I think we do have, a lot of our community that gets very concerned with density and very concerned with how infill sites are handled. So that's going to be a key discussion point as we move forward in the plan. The social component of development was not addressed, i.e. gentrification and displacement equity. We're continuing to see in our preliminary figures decline in African-American population in the city, particularly in some of the downtown neighborhoods, and you're definitely seeing those neighborhoods gentrify. Housing supply is not addressed in depth, something that will not be a problem with the new plan. We'll have lots of detail on that, as everybody was just explaining. Tourism population was not considered, and it's going to be tough for us to dive too deeply into that. We do have tourism plans. We do have on our horizon, hopefully, a new downtown plan in a couple of years. So this plan won't touch on that too much, but we will take into consideration where we have key tourism densities as we're creating land use recommendations for certain areas. Economic development opportunities were given minimal consideration, and we were coming out of a recession then. We're in a recession right now. So obviously we're going to have a lot of economic development thought that goes into the document. We don't have a separate consultant on that, but I think we've got some pretty good practical thinkers within our department and city government. Reforming permitting and the review process has been the past 2 plans and remains a major challenge. We did make big advances over the last 10 years in electronic submittals and things like that, but we still have a whole lot more to do. I would imagine with this plan, we'll have potentially even a whole new zoning ordinance to complete. So that'll be something that will be coming in future years. So lessons for next time. Sea level rise and housing should be central focus. And I think we've promised that with this document, as well as linking land use to employment. Strike a better balance between preservation and affordability. What does protect neighborhoods mean? No change at all versus promote and enhance. You know, so is the kind of BAR review of demolition items in Upper Peninsula neighborhoods something that makes them unaffordable now? You know, that's a big question I think we hear, as well as in our existing historic district neighborhoods. You know, is that making those neighborhoods more less affordable? Excuse me. Striking better balance between general goals and recommendations that allow for flexibility, but also specificity for accountability. So getting those specifics in there that were maybe not as relevant or as prominent in the 2010 plan. Include context for how other plans relate to the comprehensive plan. And that is something we still need to keep delineating, how we keep our West Ashley plan West Ashley, from being kind of swallowed up in the larger, more 30,000 foot version of the city-wide plan. And again, we've already talked about the highway designation, tourism and population economic development elements. Urban growth boundary on James Island. Recommendations that should seek to prevent sprawl and better manage the edges, and directly addressing social disparities and potential for gentrification and displacement. Promoting equity, and those are some of the guiding principles that we're already putting together for our new plan. The user document, or the user-friendly document that we got better with this document, we really need to do more with the new one, and I think we will find a document that is even easier to use than the current one is. More legible maps. We have a graphic design consultant who's going to be working with us on that. Not to have an intimidating name like Century 5. That's why we've gone with the name City Plan. So now we're going to go through, and if y'all want to stop for a second on the overall goals and review section before I do kind of some of the line by line things, is there anything yet that y'all want to bring up, or do you want to, the line by line is going to get a little bit more detail. We good to move into that? Okay, I'm getting nodding heads. Okay, so you're going to see these figures here. The check mark means, in our staff opinion, that we followed the recommendations in the plan over the last 10 years. The X mark will mean it was not followed, not implemented, or the kind of recycle mark there is to some degree, some yes, some no. So it has the up and down kind of image there. So we're going to move on into this. So in population and housing, we wanted to track changes in national and local population and demographic shifts to ensure growth management, housing, land use, and transportation policies reflect current trends and projections. I feel like that's happened to some degree. We continue to track changes locally, but you know, maybe we don't have the best data we possibly could. We monitor housing construction permits and sale prices for continuous analysis of housing needs. We definitely know where the construction permits are going, but we still don't have a good handle on sale prices. That's one of the reasons we brought on a housing consultant, because our data and ability to gather data on sale prices, rent prices, things like that is lacking. Maintain land use policies that allow for and encourage diversity in housing opportunities in a variety of neighborhood contexts. I think we've done pretty well with that. I think we've seen a whole lot more apartments built. I think we are building more affordable housing in the city of Charleston than any other jurisdiction in the Charleston region. I think we are building more diverse types of housing, from townhouses, apartments, standard single family, even now trying to come up with concepts for accessory dwelling units. Encouraging development of housing in compatible mixed-use neighborhoods and in close proximity to parks, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, public transit, schools, and civic uses. You know, areas like Carolina Bay, I think we've worked hard to have that full mix. Some of the neighborhoods on Johns Island have done a lot more in that context. And James Island, I think we've got some apartments located in areas where they can actually create more walkable places if we can get the sidewalks and the streets to be cooperative. Adopt additional development guidelines that allow and incentivize the inclusion of mixed housing types within neighborhoods. And even now, we're, like you all have seen, we're still working on the ADUs and other items that might make affordability within neighborhoods more doable. Adopt additional zoning rules that will incentivize the inclusion of workforce housing in new and infill developments. And I think we have done that with a lot of success. The MU zoning that is now in a good bit of our urban core is proof of that. Encourage retention of existing housing stock through preservation incentives and rehabilitation programs and code enforcement. To some degree, we've been getting that done, but you know, I think that code enforcement has definitely improved with our livability division over the last 10 years. But you know, definitely more money would help in that area to get even more done for encouraging the existing housing stock. Support sustainable housing development through incentives for efficient construction practices and energy efficient buildings. Maybe not pull that off all through the city, but in the Upper Peninsula area, i.e. the Morrison Drive, Upper Meeting area, we created the whole new zoning district that is very incentive based, that has incentives for energy efficiency and efficient construction practices. In economic development, shifting gears here, and I should ask any other questions or comments in population and housing? Not seeing any, okay. In economic development recommendations, work to promote and improve local and regional infrastructure, which clearly we've done, 526 being an example, the bus rapid transit being an example. Attract all types of businesses through targeted incentives. We haven't really developed any new incentives in the city, so that's still an area that's lacking. Some of it is that our state, or the way our state is organized, it's tough for localities to do that. A lot of that comes from state levels, but we still need to work on that. Provide business services and allocate resources to supporting and promoting small and local business development. We've done that. I would argue that probably we need to do a good bit more, but we have done some of that as we have analyzed this ourselves. Implemented targeted job and work centers. We definitely have done that through the plan, and we've seen a lot of those have new jobs created in them. Daniel Island Town Center area, again, Citadel Mall potentially has some new stuff coming. Upper Peninsula has definitely had a whole lot of job growth over the last 10 years. To continue to promote and grow the capacity of minority and women-owned businesses in the city, and we have a person in our department who's solely focused on that task, and definitely made strides in that direction. I think we still have a ways to go, but we're definitely making strides. And focus city resources and public finance programs on revenue generators and economic development engines. To some degree completed, but you know, probably a little bit more could be done in that realm. Comments on the economic development area? Okay.
Christopher,
Yes.
I'm curious as to where a business improvement district recommendation might come in. I still think a central business district bid would be a boon for the downtown area.
Excellent, excellent. And I know we have a new or revitalized, I guess, central business district committee that has been formed. I don't know if, is Jacob still on the meeting here? If Jacob wants to just give a 30-second overview on that. Jacob, you still here?
It's like he dropped off.
Okay. But that has come back, you know, with all the things that have happened with King Street over the last 6 months. Definitely see some needs coming there, and there's some other areas of the city that could also benefit from similar focus, I think, too. But definitely here in economic development is where we should include such items. Okay. Cultural resource recommendations: build, maintain, and preserve an array of first-class cultural facilities. Gaillard Center, perfect example, but a whole range of them. Spoleto has gone on until the pandemic made it impossible for it to go on for a year, but looking forward to it being back next year. But anyway, number 2, support and implement recommendations from Charleston Preservation Plan, including landscape scale preservation efforts on Johns Island, Kenoi. Have not gotten in that area. Our preservation staff is pretty limited, and I think we need to get more funding for more ability to undertake such efforts. Encourage public and private investment in cultural preservation, development, and diversity. Haven't really done anything in that area either. Support the growth and development of Charleston's art community. The city has done work to create the new Cannon Street Art Center. I know private sector, we've seen the new Redux facility. There also have been other art programs beyond visual art and performing arts. So definitely some things have been going on in that area. And then support policies, incentives, and plans that encourage and stimulate preservation and growth of cultural resource opportunities, including economy for heritage tourism, which has definitely increased. Thoughts and cultural resources. Okay. Natural resource recommendations. Ensure land development regulations adequately protect the city's farms, prime soils for farming, natural resources in rural areas. Again, very general. Continue to support the use of urban growth boundary and greenbelt and park system with Charleston County and West Ashley, Johns Island, James Island. Extend the UGB and greenbelt goals to include city's Berkeley County boundary at Francis Marion National Forest and Kenoi. And that has been implemented in the 2010 plan. We essentially moved the UGB to follow the Francis Marion Forest in Kenoi, and that is almost all that in the Kenoi Peninsula. That boundary line is almost all in the city. So essentially by us implementing that, it's implemented in that area of Berkeley County. To continue to provide and expand the park system to include large and small parks, as well as increase connectivity between green spaces and public access. We definitely have acquired more land for parks via greenbelt funds, but as far as being able to implement them, we've got a lot of parks that we have some plans for, but we haven't been able to start building them. So that's definitely something that's on the horizon. Of course, you all know that we're doing a new Parks and Recreation Master Plan that is going to wrap up later this year. And I've been a key element of that team, and we have been looking at all those types of issues. And I think people will be very pleased with what comes out of that. Of course, it's going to cost some money. We're going to have to figure out how to fund that in the kind of economic climate we're in, but definitely need more in the way of parks. Continue to implement appropriate building standards for elevation, wind resistance, and stormwater management, sustainability practices. This is one of the things that, we got beat up a little bit on because we didn't have much in the plan under this category. So while we have done things like raise our, for new construction, our base floor elevation used to be 1 foot above above the flood zone. Now we're requiring 2 feet. That was adopted last year, and we still are having some issues in that area and need to broaden that greatly. Adopt stormwater management best management practices and standards that are light on the land. A lot of this is in the new stormwater standards, but we still have a ways to go. I think we'll learn a lot in recommendations from Wagner and Ball, and have the plan recommending even more in areas like this. Continue air quality improvements through transportation planning and identifying and supporting local industries to reduce air pollution. Haven't really had a role in that over the last 10 years. Any thoughts on natural resource recommendations? Okay. Oh, that's right. We have one more page. How can I have forgotten? Continue to play an active role in promoting sustainability initiatives within municipal operations and community at large. Plans and education programs for sustainability and sustainable development, et cetera, et cetera. So we've done that from the standpoint that we have devoted staff members. A former planner in our office is now city's sustainability director, and Mark Wilbert works with that too. But I think there could be more in the actual plan document itself. So it's kind of a mixed bag as to whether we've implemented that. Number 8, continue to pursue a comprehensive reforms of the city's tree protection ordinance. We have done more tree canopy studies, but we have not gotten to the goal of 40%. We do have some other ideas from ordinance amendment standpoint that we potentially could implement after this new comprehensive plan. Encourage small and large landowners to manage their land by planting of native plant species and removal of invasive. We've not done that. Promote sustainability, the support for local agriculture and animal husbandry, have not done that. And inventory and document unique and sensitive natural resources, have not done that either. All right, other natural resource thoughts? Okay. All right, urban growth recommendations, more into the thick of the plan here. Support Charleston County's comprehensive plan as designation of urban growth boundary protecting rural areas. And we definitely have done that. I already talked a good bit about that. Berkeley County, we did adopt the UGB in the Cainhoy Peninsula along that area. Berkeley County didn't adopt it, but by virtue of us having it there, I think we have achieved a good bit in that direction. Work with Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester County residents and leaders to implement land conservation programs in rural areas. That has not really been implemented. Ensure city land development regulations encourage compact development patterns that minimize consumption of land. We have definitely worked on that. Such things as our cluster ordinance or our new conservation ordinance have definitely been in that area. Tailor ordinances to complement the way of life in rural areas of the city. We did adopt an agricultural zoning district for the plantation areas that we annexed along 61 outside of Village Green and those areas because of the threat of other jurisdictions allowing for greater densities out there. That helps to support the urban growth boundary too by having those agricultural districts. But we've not done them in other parts of the city where there may still be agriculture occurring. Ensure land development regulations adequately protect natural resources in urban and suburban areas of the city. Definitely have worked in that category. Ensure land development regulations protect existing farms and agricultural use, which we have not fully implemented that other than what we did out for the area along 61. And then ensure land use regulations allow urban agriculture as an alternative land use for non-contaminated vacant properties. Have not done that. More urban growth recommendations. Draft a plan within 18 months for management of growth and development on the Cainhoy Peninsula and be completely through the process in 3 years. Well, we did not implement that. However, the Cainhoy development was undertaken during this horizon and had their PUD adopted out there that dealt with that outer area of Cainhoy. But we still need to do some planning for the areas between the Cainhoy development and Daniel Island and corridor management planning along Clements Ferry Road. And we've talked to Berkeley County about that a good bit. And hopefully that can be something we work on a good bit in the next couple of years after this plan is adopted. And then consider a transfer of development rights program, which we have. I know a lot of people, look at TDRs as a really, a way to fix a lot of the suburban sprawl issues. But as we have looked at those in the Charleston region in the context of City of Charleston, other jurisdictions like Charleston County, City of North Charleston, there's so much existing density in the areas that you would transfer into. There may not be enough of an incentive to go from the sending areas where you'd want lower density to the receiving areas. And we can certainly get into a little bit more detail about that if y'all have questions, but I will say that we have definitely considered transfer of development rights program and considered it too costly and problematic to be a real solution for our region. Other thoughts on urban growth recommendations? Okay. All right, neighborhood recommendations. Engage existing neighborhoods in more detailed design studies to examine specifically how growth can improve quality of life. I think we definitely have a robust dialogue with our existing neighborhoods. And I think that we have done some urban design studies in areas where we feel like there's a neighborhood threat. We probably need to do a little bit more, but in general, I think we feel like we are working on that with our Civic Design Center and also with our strong relationship we have with our recognized city neighborhoods that our neighborhood services coordinator handles. Revise land development regulations to focus on compatible mix of building types. Buildings must reflect rather than be foreign to the neighborhood scale. In general, that happens in our BAR and DRB jurisdiction. There could be instances with, you know, incompatible zoning in other areas of the city that's not as prevalent, but in general, we think we've been doing that. Revised land management regulations to allow for sustainable urban farming and small animal husbandry have not worked in that area at all. Permit a variety of housing services, workplaces, and civic institutions in neighborhood settings. Strive to locate such a mix of uses within a 5-minute walk of any residence. And that has been a strong emphasis as we have looked at the developments that are reviewed over the last 10 years, have been reviewed over the last 10 years, trying to diversify where those locations are. Concentrate higher density housing within a 5 to 10 minute walk of transit stops. Try to do that in areas that have maybe somewhat limited transit to improve the level of transit. We definitely have done a good bit of that in the King Meeting, Morrison Drive area, which have some of the best transit in the city, but have not had as much success in areas like Maybank Highway or Folly Road. Accommodate full spectrum of housing for all neighborhoods by permitting a range of building types compatible with the neighborhood setting. Have done that some in newer neighborhoods, but not on an infill scale as we would have liked. Provide larger district parks, 50+ acres for active and passive use within safe biking distance of all residents of the city. That has not happened. The only new park, and it's not a city park, that has been developed that's of this size in the last 10 years is the, I believe, the Asham Park that is next to Charlestown Landing. I'm drawing a blank on its name, but the PRC has handled that, but it doesn't have the active use that I think people might want to see, but it does have passive uses. Provide neighborhood parks within a 10-minute walk of all homes. Work with neighborhood councils to find locations in existing neighborhoods and require new neighborhoods to be designed with usable parks. We try to get something, even if it's an HOA area in our newly planned neighborhoods. It's tough to have neighborhoods we don't have money available to create a city park in, you know, most neighborhoods, but at least we can be looking at the locations that the HOA has available to them too. I believe we have a few more neighborhood recommendations. Here we go. Expand park connections like greenways and bikeways by seeking partnerships with utility providers for use of utility corridors and expanded use of unused rail corridors. Definitely have been doing that. And adding to our bikeway system, providing community agriculture opportunities within a 10-minute walk of all the homes. Have done a little bit of that, new West Ashley Farmers Market, but well, actually, and thinking about the community gardens, excuse me, and at Magnolia and downtown and on James Island. Some of you all know a little bit more about that than I do. I know, looking at you, Mr. Lassane, but provide a productive environment for review of our new development projects that include citizen involvement early in the process. We've been getting better at that, but we definitely have a lot more work to do there. Other thoughts from commission members? Okay. Gathering place recommendations. So the dreaded gathering place was still a part of our plan recommendations. I don't know if we'll be using that term into the future since it got such a bad image, but from the standpoint of working with surrounding neighborhoods, creating appropriate area plans and zoning for gathering place locations around the city and new mixed use walkable centers. Of course, there was the gathering place that was planned in the mid 2000 from I guess it was 2004 or so for the Maybank and Folly Road corridor. A lot of that was implemented over the last 10 years with the standard and with the Avalon that is just being completed and the revitalization of the James Island Center and some of the revitalization of some things along Maybank Highway. So we do have one of the most walkable areas on James Island, but I would hazard a guess that a lot of people on James Island are not happy with how that one has turned out because there's been a lot of concern about the density there. However, we do have more people who can walk to more things there than we've ever had before. We need to do more work with sidewalks. We need to do more work with the character of Maybank Highway, but I think progress has been made there. West Ashley Circle progress is being made. We've got the first housing going into the areas around West Ashley Circle. Assure that plans for gathering places are as transit friendly as possible. Still working to get better mass transit to that one along Maybank Highway at Folly Road. It has some limited bus access. Focus city development efforts on all these sites, including possible public participation and infrastructure incentives to make them as economically feasible as possible. To a degree, we've done that, but I would probably be harsher on this and say that we don't get a full check mark on that one. But anyway, moving on. Other thoughts on gathering places? I'm doing a lot of talking here. You know, nobody's thinking.
Keep going, Christopher. Keep going.
This is one of the ones that I know you all some definite thoughts in the community. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Existing traffic patterns and recommendations. So we're enhancing the city's network with road improvements, coordinate with SCDOT and CHATS in Charleston and Berkeley counties. Definitely been moving forward on that. I think with the half-cent sales tax, we've seen a lot of things implemented that have helped things, particularly Johns Island has gotten better, and particularly with the improvements that are coming to 26 and 526, and then the bus rapid transit. Monitor streets with decreasing traffic load for potential road diets. Haven't really done this as much. North Charleston did it with Squirrel Avenue. We've talked about it for Upper Meeting Street beyond Mount Pleasant Street, but haven't gotten there yet. Interested in thoughts on things like that, and happy to explain road diets more if y'all want. Monitor routes with increasing traffic load for enhanced transit routes and possible physical improvements. Definitely been doing that. And of course, we have our citywide transportation plan that was adopted, I guess, 2 to 3 years ago too. So making progress there. Okay. Street recommendations. There was a whole lot about streets in this plan, and I don't know if we're going to go into this deep detail in our new plan because it's not one of the areas of key emphasis, but we've got a number of things in this plan that we're just going to kind of go through here real quick. Design new streets and improve existing streets to accommodate walking, bicycling, vehicular travel. I think we've got more bike lanes than we've ever had, more sidewalks, but still have so much to do to get it to all areas, all neighborhoods. Adopt the new draft street standards. We have not done that. In fact, I'm not even sure where that draft of street standards is. So we need more work on that. Don't know if anybody from Charleston Moves is on our call today, but I'm sure that they would like to see some more things happen in that area. Monitor all resurfacing of streets for possible inclusion of bike lanes where road widths allow. Have definitely done that. We've seen new bike lanes come in areas like Morrison Drive, Folly Road because of that, St. Andrews Boulevard. Target transportation investments to enhance the existing transportation network, coordinate with DOT and CHATS. Have been continuing to do that, and then the citywide transportation plan does that. Prioritize improvements to existing thoroughfares and bottlenecks at major intersections and bridge locations, and have been doing that. Network expansion recommendations assure that all neighborhood, commercial, and mixed-use developments are fully connected on all sides, and we have definitely been doing that. I think some developments, maybe Carolina Bay, when those final connections get open and suddenly outside neighbors are coming through their neighborhood, people are kind of scratching their heads a little bit and saying, am I fully for this? But we know that from overall network connectivity, it's just so critical. And, you know, getting the word out about the different types of streets that people are buying houses on is very important, that people understand that they're on a street that might connect one day to a new high school or something like that, so that they know that there'll be more traffic on their street than they might see when they buy it. Seek to create as many network connections as possible between key suburban arterials. Add any needed connections to the city's master road plan, which we did a little bit of around West Ashley Circle and all, but we need to do more for Johns Island in particular. Implement connections designated in the city's master road plan, coordinate with DOT and CHATS and counties, inclusion of unneeded priority lists, and we're still working through that. Thoughts here? Anything? Nothing? Okay. Bike and ped mobility recommendations. Create and implement street standards and city policy that requires every street to be built as a complete street, including bike facilities for all mobility types. So I might argue, and this is one that I kind of glossed over when I was reviewing this, so I'll point that out. But I might argue that we probably do have a some positive, some negative on this, because I think we did get a complete street policy adopted on this. Some of my staff would know better, I think, but Keith has gotten that adopted. Implement the routes and improvements shown on the attached pedestrian bike plan maps using a set of new street standards. Again, better in the way of bike routes, but still not everywhere we need to be. Enhance and update the proposed and planned network shown on the accompanying maps as funds permit. Keep working on that, but still limited funds. I don't know if the funding levels have increased any over the last 10 years. Work with the city's bike and pedestrian committee and community to encourage and facilitate multiple modes in every way possible. Bike share has been a huge advance over the last 10 years. So that's been a good one. Getting the Ashley River Bridge funded with the federal grant that will let the Greenway connect to downtown has been huge. Ensure that the city's pedestrian amenities accommodate all users regardless of disability, always doing that. We have somebody who evaluates all those types of issues with our TRC process. Number 6, implement the recommendations of the West Ashley Greenway Master Plan and continue efforts to improve facilities along its route. Mr. Pullman, I know, watches over that one carefully, and Mr. Lassane and the Parks Conservancy have been very involved in that too. Construct the bicycle pedestrian lane for the Ashley Bridge, as already mentioned. Establish an agreement with local utilities for use of utility corridors. I know we've got a couple of those done, but we have many more corridors to go. And then seek funding to support aforementioned recommendations and improvements. Charleston Moves has been very good advocate from that standpoint. City should work to make sure every residence is in the cities within a half-mile, 10-minute walk of dedicated bike and ped facility. We probably need to evaluate that in our new plan, and it might be some good maps that we could have. City should analyze streets that are currently serving the greatest traffic volumes to ensure that those streets are safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I think Keith Benjamin has been working with the DOT on just a study such as this, particularly with Calhoun Street, with King Street, maybe Meeting Street as well. So, public transportation. Work closely with CARTA to identify optimal transit routes, and we're continuously working with them. Our T&T folks continuously are discussing that with them. Promote walkable neighborhoods and developments, appropriate densities to support key transit. Again, the density word, a lot of folks don't like greater density on some of our key corridors, but getting the density on the key corridors helps us get it linked with transit faster than anything else we can do. Continue to protect the railroad right-of-way running the length of the peninsula and connecting downtown with North Charleston and Somerville for uses of future transit corridor. Well, we got the low line. It's going to be a bike ped facility. It's not really going to be a transit corridor necessarily, although you got transit on either side on King Street and Meeting Street, but we have protected that railroad corridor. So that's been a huge advance over the last 10 years. And study potential transit stops along that corridor. And we've been continuing to do that with the bus rapid transit. Thoughts on public transportation? Okay. Water transportation. So continue efforts to enhance service between the peninsula and Mount Pleasant with enhanced and better located dock locations downtown. This is one of the areas that I really think, you know, in 20 years, with the way the road systems are and the road system funding is, that it's going to be so much cheaper to get a really good set of ferries and other watercraft to link Mount Pleasant to downtown, to link downtown to Daniel Island, to link areas even in West Ashley over. And you saw with the Laurel Island plan how they have a ferry dock for Laurel Island that I think if you got on a ferry at Laurel Island, you could probably be in an area like Waterfront Park and any employment opportunities near there faster than you could by going on any roadway as we get into the future. So definitely an area that I think we can do more and it will benefit us all. Thoughts on water transportation? Okay. So here we are into municipal service recommendations. Establish adequate public facility standards consistent with service standards throughout the city. Have not done that. Some of this gets beyond what the planning department can do, but we can definitely recommend some of these things. Continue to focus cities' annexation efforts in urban and suburban areas within the urban growth boundary. We definitely do that. We do not annex outside the urban growth boundary. Manage provision of municipal services and facilities in rural, suburban, urban areas. We do that to a great extent, but better city services always are, something that we're working towards. Implement impact fees for environmental services and public safety. So I should point out here that this is also something we've studied a lot over the last 10 years. Impact fees are incredibly difficult to implement in South Carolina. And, Mount Pleasant is one of the few cities in South Carolina that have been able to implement them very effectively. And they were so effective in Mount Pleasant that the state changed the laws for impact fees after Mount Pleasant and a few jurisdictions completed them. And they've made it much harder to implement them. So we are not super confident that impact fees are going to be a good funding source for us unless there are changes made at the state level in how you implement them, because they have just become so complicated. And you also cannot use them for things that are already in capital improvement programs. And almost everything that you all might think of that you might like to see an impact fee pay for, if it's shown up in a capital improvement plan, then you can't use an impact fee to pay for it. It's crazy. It's like you have to start over with impact fees and start with a whole new list of projects. And that's one of the ways it's just super, super complicated. And sorry to dwell on that so much, but it's a very frustrating thing for us. Provide an annual report on development impact fee funds and purchases. Again, aren't doing that because we aren't purchasing things that way. Identify sources of fund that can be used to offset costs associated with waiving impact fees for affordable housing. Limited success in that. Reevaluate existing impact fee prior to its expiration. Have not done that. In fact, impact fees went away. The limited ones we had them for, I believe they were for garbage vehicles and public service vehicles and fire vehicles. And I think we might have been able to fund purchase of one or two. This is in the 2000s, and don't remember the year that they went away, but this is not happening anymore. So research and evaluate other city services that may need additional funding due to growth and analyze existing city revenue streams. So one thing we have done in this area, number 9, that we do think we've got a lot of potential for, and we'll be bringing some things through you all in the future, is a municipal improvement district. And we think that Johns Island is a very fertile area for a municipal improvement district that would put extra fees on new residents going in there, but they would not apply to existing residents. And the new fees could go to transportation improvements, drainage improvements, park improvements, things like that. And we're looking, given the number of approved units coming on Johns Island, we think we could have a successful municipal improvement district out there. And of course, Long Savannah has its own internal municipal improvement district as well. So 2 of the areas in our suburban areas that are going to grow the most have good programs in place that may even be better than impact fees. So moving on. So that is what we were going to go through. I have done a whirlwind zip through. Apologize for speaking too fast, but thoughts, comments? Has everybody stayed awake? Donna has raised her hand. I see. All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm curious if we put that list of recommendations to the public, what kind of input we would get. Not that they would understand everything, but the recommendations have been evaluated by people that are intimately involved in all the details. And sometimes the public doesn't really know there's been some successes. They think that the city isn't doing anything. So I just wonder, what have we thought about putting out something to the public just to find out? Because sometimes we find out where we really didn't do a good job because we missed something, because we're kind of internally evaluating ourselves with a lot of nuanced knowledge.
And I think we could definitely put this slideshow on our website and, have an area for comment on it, because I think that's a good idea. let
I
people-
think that might be helpful,
Mhm.
just based on some of the community engagements that I've attended. I've heard a lot of thought. I mean, people are really, there's maybe not a lot of people, but people are there, very engaged. They want to know things, they're learning, they have good ideas.
Mhm.
It might be helpful to find out if we've missed an evaluation of ourselves before we move forward.
All right. We will work to get that done. Definitely.
And Christopher, I'm actually struck by, you know, it was a very good plan, a good, strong plan with some good, strong recommendations. Obviously, things have changed since then, and there are new priorities, but that's to be expected. I'm like Ms. Jacobs. I'm actually impressed with the amount of work that was done on a whole host of issues. Clearly, transportation was a big priority, and I think a lot of that work was done. And so, anyhow, I agree with Ms. Jacobs that getting that out there would be helpful, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, well, that wraps up the presentations for this meeting. And now we have time for public comment. I believe we had at least one person sign up to make a comment. So Chloe, I will hand it to you to connect that person to us.
Thank you, Harry. Yes, Cashin signed up to speak. So Cashin, I'm going to enable your microphone now. And you should be able to unmute whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes, we can.
Cashin Drolet, Historic Charleston Foundation. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for that very thorough review of the Century 5 plan. You certainly have identified some challenges for certain that we have with this new comprehensive plan. Commissioners, as you know, the comprehensive plan is a guiding document for the development and redevelopment of our city, but it also represents a vision and goals for our city for the next 10 years. HCF has been advocating that in this new comprehensive plan, that it should be driven by living with water, the specter of sea level rise, and livability for citizens. And all the planning elements should use those as guiding principles. We're very encouraged by the unconventional consultant team for this process, particularly the housing and water consultants. We'd encourage the commission to review the Dutch Dialogue Charleston final report. We believe that those recommendations should be fully incorporated into the new city plan. Those recommendations range from land use recommendations, a citywide water plan, study areas of the city with very specific recommendations for each of those study areas based upon their distinct water features, and avoidance of fill and build development, potential adjustments to entitlement, and encouragement incentives for on-site water storage and infiltration. HCF is looking forward to being a collaborator and a partner and a resource to the Planning Commission and city staff on development of the city plan, and we will be presenting a formalized list of specific recommendations for elements of the plan. We are mostly focused on the housing, cultural resources, natural resources, and land use elements. Lastly, I wanted to thank the commission and the city staff for your commitment to resiliency and including resiliency as its own element in the plan, accounting for flooding and high water and increased natural hazards that our city is facing. We're really energized by the inclusion of this as an element in the plan and the city going above the minimal standards required by the state and the Enabling Act. And we would encourage the commissioners and the city staff to look at the resiliency element in coordination with all of the other planning elements. And thank you. I appreciate being able to speak with you this afternoon.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Allais. And I think your comment about connecting the city plan to other special plans, special area plans, and other plans have been done recently. That was mentioned earlier. I believe Mr. Morgan mentioned that as a priority, and I think that's a good recommendation. All right, Chloe, do we have anybody else?
Nobody else signed up.
All right. Well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. Does anybody on the commission have any other comments they'd like to make?
Looks like Ms. Olympus is raising her hand.
Yeah, I was, are we going to get this in a written form so that we can print it and review it?
Do you mean the whole plan or this?
Well, just what was presented today, like, you know, it's hard to look at some of the, it's hard to look at some of this, you know, the watershed and all that stuff on the screen. And
our consultants, the info from our consultants. Okay, that we're going to get a whole lot more to you as they finish their work. These were just to kind of give you all a sense of that. They're still refining a lot of those graphics. So that will be coming your way ultimately, but not like in the next few weeks. But we could definitely get the presentation I just went through to you all in a written form if you would like.
Yes, and I mean, that's good to hear that it's coming because it was, you know, we saw all of that. I mean, it looked like really very important information for us to just really get a glimpse of it on my little iPad. So.
Okay.
Should they just be added to our Dropbox, Chloe?
Yeah, the slides that Christopher just went over, absolutely. I think what with the data slides, because that is still sort of in progress, they showed them to give you a sense of what they are developing, but I think, you know, it's still in development. It's not in its final form. And so I think it might be too early to be sharing those out.
Oh, I understand about the data slides. I was mainly looking at that evaluation that Christopher went through, and you know, like the weaknesses and the lessons learned, those slides, because that was a lot to take in. And you know, as we go through community engagement, we may hear some things that we can just highlight on those that we can bring back, as like we're hearing a lot of comments on this particular subject. You know, I mean, y'all are taking those in, but as a commissioner, it's always good to hear it too. Just the more ears on the problem or the compliment, the better.
Yes. So I will put the slides in your Dropbox, and as Christopher mentioned, we can also put them on the city plan website, and I'll make sure to link to the slides on the YouTube, where this video is on YouTube in the description, so that it's paired with the presentation. Make it easy for everybody to access.
Great.
All right, any other comments or questions from the commission? All right, well, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time and attention. Thanks to the staff and our consultants for your presentations, and we will see y'all at our next meeting. Chloe, I do think maybe sending out to the commission once again the dates for the special meetings related to the comp plan would be helpful, just so everybody's got them on the calendar for the right day.
Will do.
All right. I can also put that schedule in the Dropbox, if that would be helpful.
And just so everybody knows, so your next regular meeting is September 16th. That'll be at 5 o'clock. That's Wednesday, September 16th. But the next time we meet on the comprehensive plan issues will be at 3 o'clock on Monday, the 28th. And we're doing these in general on Monday afternoons. You know, if that time proves to not be as good for folks, you know, please let us know. But that seemed to be a time that was going to work pretty well. But Monday, September 28th will be the next comprehensive plan discussion with you all.
Chloe, weren't the dates open for the water labs? Have those been confirmed? Can you announce those if they have, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they have been announced, and they are Friday in the newsletter, in the Hey Neighbor newsletter. They were announced, and then the newsletter that went out this morning for the city plan, they were also announced there. So it is for Wednesday. That we're only going to do one day, morning and night water labs, Wednesday, September 23rd, and because we have Louisiana-based folks on that team, we're moving it up to an 11:30 a.m. start time versus 9 like the other meetings. And the evening one will be 6 to 7:30 p.m. like our other community meetings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. We'll be hearing from y'all soon again. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.